What's up, everyone? Welcome to This Day in Philly Sports History for January 25th, 2023. Well, before we get into anything, I just want to apologize to anybody who experienced deja vu when you tried to listen to yesterday's podcast. I'm not really sure what happened, but for some reason, the episode from January 21st uploaded instead of yesterday's date. So I don't know if it was on the server that I use or whether it was user error, whether that was me. But I do apologize. So if you didn't listen, go back and listen to Tuesday's episode of This Day in Philly Sports History for January 24th. We did a little Temple Owls tribute in honor of this week, either tonight or tomorrow. It won't drop until Thursday, but I'm trying to figure out my schedule as far as the new episode of Back to the Future. It's the anniversary of both the death and the birth of John Chaney, so we're doing a John Chaney special this week. So be on the lookout for that. But a lot of big Temple sports history moments, especially for that basketball team in the next few weeks. So be sure to check that out. And I do apologize for any confusion, but you can go check that out. It should all be situated and straightened out. Ironically enough, part of my positive messages for Tuesday was the big difference between 99 and 100%. That's on me. Had I given 100%, I would have made sure that the correct episode was uploaded rather than just giving the 99 and then having the wrong date. So again, I do apologize, owning the mistake, and ironically enough, it ties in with the message from yesterday. So be sure to check that out. Quick Eagles update. Today's the day we're going to get some clarity on some of the injuries, whether Vontae Maddox might be back. I know A.J. Brown was a little bit banged up. Lane was sore, but I don't think there's any way you're keeping Lane out of this game. No way whatsoever. But we'll get more clarity on a lot of different things after practice today when when the first injury reports come out. But I'm sure at this point everybody has seen the information. The last time Brock Purdy and Jalen Hurts played each other was back in 2019 when Oklahoma took on Ohio State, and they were in an absolute shootout, which is, like, to me, that's like the typical Big 12 game, was just that shootout. It was 42-41, 11 touchdowns, like just complete and utter insanity. Both defenses are better this time around for the Niners and the Eagles, so I don't see a 42-41 shootout, but you never know. But be sure to check out the highlights from that. It was actually pretty interesting to see a young Jalen Hurts just slinging it around, still having that same look and same mindset, mentality, and everything. So getting pumped, starting to get there. We're going to go more as we get into tomorrow. We'll get more into game preview and things like that. Flyers lost 4-3 last night in overtime to the Kings. I believe the Kings are one of the better teams. So the fact that they took them into overtime, I'm not sure. I've been paying a lot more attention to this Flyers team. I actually watched some of the third period before I fell asleep last night, and they seem like they're playing with a lot of energy. And I don't know if that's the coach or whether that is the just the player. I still don't think they're there yet from a talent standpoint, but it was actually somewhat entertaining to watch, better than what I had anticipated and thought with everything. So I don't know, but a loss at this point is still good. The other big news, and I wasn't sure how to react to this, it was more of an indifferent kind of like, oh, wow, really? But former Philly Scott Rowland was inducted into the Hall of Fame last night, and I don't necessarily consider him a Philly guy, but in kind of doing a lot of the reading and seeing what was going on, he played more games for the Phillies than any other team combined, which I did not realize that he was here only 6 years. But kind of my initial reaction was, man, like you're kind of that post steroid era because those guys obviously still didn't make it in, and I'll get more into that. That this is a Philly base, so none of those guys are Philly based, but. The Scott Rowland thing, like I said, I just like, I don't know. To me, I feel like he's one of those borderline guys. I kind of put him there with maybe like a Chase Utley, who's like not quite there. Donovan McNabb, like, eh. But I mean, he got voted in. He barely got in. I don't necessarily understand the way the rules are. Like, they have to put somebody in. Like, do you have to put somebody in? Like, is it the Hall of Great or is it the Hall of Fame? Like, I don't know. But it did get me thinking because J. Roll only got around like 12% of the votes. And and again, I didn't dive into this, but like just thinking like the guys in that era and like the guys that came before him, where Roland ranks probably in the all-time third baseman from an offensive standpoint. He was a hell of a defensive third baseman. I'll give him that. But like, is he one of the top third basemen ever? And then you look at J-Roll, who there's a guy on Twitter I've been following who's been posting like where J-Roll stands in regards to other shortstops that are in the Hall of Fame. J-Roll's numbers are like up there, and there's so many numbers that he's the only one. I don't know. I feel Jimmy Rollins should be in the Hall of Fame over a guy like Scott Rowland. Maybe I'm wrong. Let me know what you think, and I will dive more into that. But just like I said, my initial reaction was like, really, Scott Rowland? All right, dude. And of course, he played more games for the Phillies, and like I don't want any parts of him being a Hall of Famer for me. He didn't win anything. He won it out. Fuck him. But anyway. This day in Philly sports history, we are going to go back to January 25th, 1981. One of the most devastating and disappointing days in Eagles history. It was Super Bowl 15 down in New Orleans at the Superdome. The Eagles were taking on the Oakland Raiders, who were a wild card team who lost the division on the tiebreaker. The Eagles had beaten them earlier in the season. We know how that turned out. 27-10, the Raiders beat the Eagles to become the first wild card team to actually win the Super Bowl. The big story was Rod Martin intercepted Jaworski 3 times, and we covered that Minnesota game. We covered the Dallas NFC Championship game, and that was sort of where Jaworski was going into the Super Bowl. Like, he was turning the ball over like it was his job. Come the Super Bowl, he did it 3 times too. And that's not to take anything away from the Raiders' defense. It's just Jaworski was not playing his best football going into that game. And when you have an opportunistic defense and a good offensive team like the Raiders, they took advantage of it. I'd be remiss if I didn't give a shout out to my boy Kenny King's dad, who put the Raiders up 14-0 and basically put the game out of reach with an 80-yard touchdown catch from Jim Plunkett. Still a dagger to this day. But I feel as though this was the peak of that Dick Vermeil era of Eagles football. They made it to the wild card next year, and that was it. And then they went into the abyss until 1988 when, Buddy Ryan took them back to the playoffs and winning the division. The highlights from that season for the Eagles were they did go 12-4 and won the division. They beat the Cowboys in the NFC Championship game, which is a huge memory for a lot of Eagles fans. But on this day, unfortunately, it was all Raiders, 27-10 in Super Bowl 15. Kind of crazy that the way the schedule and everything has progressed over the years. Here we are leading into the NFC Championship game, and 24 years ago, or 34 years ago, I don't know, 44 years ago at this point, 43 years ago. It's quick math there. But the Super Bowl was already over, and we're done with football season, and we still have another 3 weeks of football, or 3.5 weeks at this point of football left. So just kind of one of those interesting things about how the way things evolve and everything. But Super Bowl 15, this day in Philly sports history. Go check out the Brock Purdy versus Jalen Hurts college highlights. Again, check out yesterday's pod too if you didn't. I do apologize for that. That's 100% on me, whether it was a server error or my error. I have to be better at that. Tell me what you think. Is Scott Rowland a Hall of Famer? I mean, is he one of the greatest third basemen of all time overall? I mean, I can name 3 off the top of my head. Schmitty, Brett, and Brooks Robinson. He's not, but I don't know. Tell me your thoughts. Go have yourselves a Wednesday, and until next time, I'll see you when I see you.